They say every father's worst nightmare is losing his children. But they never tell you it can happen while you're wide awake, holding a cup of coffee, watching your kids argue over cereal. My name is David, and 3 years ago, I had everything. Sarah, my brilliant 10-year-old who could solve math problems faster than I could read them. Jake, my 8-year-old comedian who made me laugh until my sides hurt. And Lisa, my wife of 12 years, who kissed me goodbye that Tuesday morning like she had 1,000 times before. But that Tuesday, October 15th, 2019, wasn't like the others, because at exactly 9:47 a.m., while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 8 years. My hands shook as I answered. "David, it's me. It's Marcus, my college roommate, the one who disappeared after graduation, the one who'd been Lisa's boyfriend before me. I know I have no right to call you," his voice cracked, "but I can't live with this anymore. Lisa, she's been lying to you about everything, about the kids, about why I really left town. David, I'm so sorry, but Sarah and Jake, they're not..." The line went dead. But those 13 words had already destroyed my world. See, I thought I knew my wife. I thought I knew my children. I thought I knew my own life. But in that moment, sitting in my office chair, staring at a family photo on my desk, I realized I'd been living someone else's story. A story built on lies, so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that it took me years to unravel them all. The mistake I made wasn't in how I handled the truth. It wasn't in the tears, the confrontation, or even the DNA tests that followed. My mistake was believing that the truth would set us free. Instead, it became the weapon Lisa used to take my children away forever. You see, she'd been planning this for months, maybe years. The affair was just the surface. Beneath it was a web of legal documents, falsified records, and manipulated testimony that painted me as the villain in my own story. She'd turned my love for my children into evidence of my obsession. My concern for their well-being became controlling behavior. My fight for custody became harassment. The system that was supposed to protect families, it became her weapon. The lawyers I trusted, they were already bought. The judge, who was supposed to be impartial, he'd been fed a narrative about me that was so twisted, so believable, that even I started to doubt myself. Today, Sarah is 13. Jake is 11. I don't know what they look like now. I don't know if Sarah still loves math or if Jake still tells terrible jokes. I don't know if they remember the father who used to read them bedtime stories or if they only remember the monster their mother told them I was. But I know this. What happened to me is happening to fathers across America right now. Good men who love their children are being systematically destroyed by a system that can be manipulated, exploited, and weaponized by those who know how to work it. This is my story. The story of how 13 words on a Tuesday morning cost me everything I lived for. It's the story of betrayal, systematic manipulation, and the darkest corners of family court that nobody talks about. But it's also the story of a father who refuses to give up, who spent 3 years uncovering the truth, gathering evidence, and building a case that just might bring his children home. If you're a parent, if you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart, or if you've ever wondered how far someone would go to destroy the person they once claimed to love, then you need to hear this story. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone. Hit that like button if this story resonates with you. Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your support keeps me fighting. Subscribe to this channel because over the next 10 episodes, I'm going to show you exactly how this happened, how the system failed us, and how I'm fighting to get my children back. Your support isn't just engagement. It's fuel for a father's fight to come home to his kids. The coffee was still warm in my hands when my world ended. I remember that detail because it's the kind of thing your mind clings to when everything else is falling apart. The temperature of liquid against your palm, the sound of your children's laughter from the kitchen, The way morning light filtered through your office blinds. Marcus's voice was different, older, scared. When he said Lisa's name, something cold crawled up my spine. I'd always wondered why my college roommate had vanished after graduation, why he'd broken up with Lisa so abruptly, why he'd moved across the country without explanation. Now I was about to find out. "David, I'm so sorry, but Sarah and Jake, they're not—" The line went dead, but those 13 words hung in the air like smoke. "They're not what? Not my children? Not safe? Not who I thought they were?" I called back immediately. The number was disconnected. I tried again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. Nothing. Marcus had disappeared again, but this time he'd left a bomb behind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lisa lay beside me, breathing peacefully, while I stared at the ceiling and wondered what secrets lived in the space between us. I studied her face in the moonlight, searching for signs of deception I'd missed for 12 years. Had she always been a stranger? Had I been living with an enemy? The next morning, I watched my children eat breakfast with new eyes. Sarah's dark hair, so different from my blonde. Jake's green eyes, nothing like mine or Lisa's brown ones. Features I'd attributed to distant relatives suddenly seemed foreign, suspicious. Was I losing my mind, or had I been blind? I found myself studying family photos with a magnifying glass, looking for clues I'd missed. Every smile seemed forced now. Every family moment felt staged. The foundation of my life was cracking, and I didn't even know why. When Lisa kissed me goodbye that morning, I tasted betrayal on her lips. Or maybe I was going crazy. Maybe Marcus was lying, playing some sick joke, trying to destroy my happiness out of jealousy or spite. But his voice had been broken, haunted. That wasn't the sound of a man telling lies. I made a decision that would haunt me forever. I decided to find out the truth. I hired a private investigator without telling Lisa. James Morrison was a former cop with tired eyes and a reputation for uncovering uncomfortable truths. When I told him about Marcus's call, he didn't seem surprised. "Paternity cases," he said quietly. "They're always messier than people think." The first thing we did was track down Marcus. It took Morrison 3 days to find him in Portland, Oregon, working as a high school teacher under his middle name. When Morrison called him, Marcus broke down crying on the phone. He agreed to meet me, but only if I came alone. I flew to Portland on a Saturday, telling Lisa I had a business conference. The lies came easier than I expected. Maybe I was learning from her. Marcus looked older, grayer, like he'd been carrying a heavy weight for years. When he saw me in that coffee shop, he started crying again. "I should have told you earlier," he whispered. "But she threatened me. Said she'd destroy my career, my reputation." I was young and scared, and I believed her. He pulled out a folder of documents, medical records, lab results, photos, evidence of an affair that had lasted through my entire marriage. The paternity test results were the worst part. Sarah and Jake weren't my biological children. They were Marcus's. Lisa had been lying to all of us for over a decade, playing us against each other, using our love for the children as weapons to keep us silent. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Marcus told me next. Lisa had been planning this for months. She'd been building a case against me, painting me as an unstable, controlling husband. She'd been recording our conversations, documenting my every move, preparing for the day when she'd take the children and disappear. "She's been visiting lawyers," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "She's going to file for divorce and accuse you of abuse. She's already planted evidence, David. She's going to destroy you." I felt like I was drowning. Every breath was a struggle. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had been systematically dismantling my life, preparing to frame me for crimes I'd never committed. How long had she been planning this? How many of our conversations had been lies? Flying home, I realized I had two choices: confront Lisa and risk everything, or stay silent and let her destroy me on her timeline. Either way, I was going to lose my children. The only question was whether I'd go down fighting or let her murder me in my sleep. I chose to fight. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I confronted Lisa on a Sunday morning. The kids were at her mother's house, and we were alone in the kitchen, where we'd shared 1,000 meals, 1,000 conversations, 1,000 lies. I put the paternity test results on the table between us, like a declaration of war. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. No tears, no denials, no apologies, just a cold smile that I'd never seen before. "You hired an investigator," she said calmly. "That's going to look bad in court." "In court?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Lisa, those are my children. I've raised them for 10 years. I love them more than my own life." "They're not your children," she said, and her voice was like ice. "They never were. You've been living a lie, David, but don't worry, I'll make sure the transition is smooth. You can have supervised visits, maybe, if you behave." That's when I realized the depth of her planning. This wasn't an affair gone wrong or a marriage falling apart. This was a calculated campaign to destroy me, orchestrated by someone who'd been studying my weaknesses for over a decade. She knew exactly which buttons to push, which words would send me over the edge. I lost it. I screamed at her, called her names I'd never used before, accused her of being a monster. She just sat there, watching me with those cold eyes, and I realized she was recording everything. My rage, my pain, my breakdown, it was all being documented for her lawyers. "You're proving my point," she said quietly. "Look at you, David. You're unstable, violent. The children aren't safe with you." I grabbed her phone, trying to stop the recording, and she screamed. Really screamed, like I was attacking her. The neighbors probably heard it. More evidence for her case. I was playing right into her hands, and I couldn't stop myself. That night, she took the children and left. She filed for divorce the next morning, along with a restraining order accusing me of domestic violence. By Tuesday, I was banned from my own home and prohibited from seeing Sarah and Jake. The system I'd trusted to protect my family had been weaponized against me. And the worst part? I'd helped her do it. How does a father go from loving protector to legal enemy overnight? What would you do if everything you believed about your family turned out to be a lie? My lawyer, Richard Brennan, was a family law specialist with 20 years of experience. He took one look at Lisa's filings and shook his head. "This is sophisticated," he said. "She's been planning this for a long time." The restraining order was just the beginning. Lisa had documented years of alleged controlling behavior. Times I'd asked where she was going, questioned expenses, wanted to know about her friends. Normal married couple conversations had been transformed into evidence of psychological abuse. She'd saved text messages where I'd expressed concern about the children's safety, twisting my parental worry into obsessive stalking. She'd recorded conversations where I'd raised my voice during arguments, editing them to remove context and make me sound threatening. She'd even taken photos of herself with makeup that looked like bruises. But the most devastating evidence was the psychological evaluation she'd commissioned. A therapist named Dr. Sarah Chen had interviewed Lisa and the children, painting me as a narcissistic abuser who'd been manipulating the family for years. The children, she reported, were afraid of their father's volatile temper and relieved to be in a safe environment. My kids were afraid of me. That's what the report said. Sarah and Jake, who used to run to me when I came home from work, who begged me to read them bedtime stories, who called me the best daddy in the world. They were afraid of me. I demanded my own psychological evaluation, but the damage was done. Dr. Chen's report was already in the court file, already shaping the judge's perception of me. My evaluation, conducted months later, seemed like a desperate attempt to contradict established facts. The worst part was the supervised visits. Once a week for 2 hours, I could see my children in a sterile room with a social worker watching our every interaction. Sarah and Jake seemed confused, scared, different. They'd been told things about me, fed stories about why Daddy wasn't living with them anymore. "Did you hurt Mommy?" Sarah asked during our third visit, her voice small and uncertain. I wanted to scream, to tell her the truth, to explain that Mommy was the one doing the hurting. But the social worker was watching, taking notes, and I knew that any emotional response would be used against me. "No, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking. "Daddy would never hurt anyone. I love you so much." But I could see the doubt in her eyes. The poison was already spreading. Judge Patricia Hawthorne had been on the family court bench for 15 years. She was supposed to be impartial, fair, committed to the best interests of the children. But from the moment I walked into her courtroom, I could see that she'd already made up her mind. Lisa's lawyer, Janet Morrison, was a shark in a business suit. She painted me as a controlling abuser who'd fooled everyone for years, a master manipulator who'd even convinced himself he was the victim. She presented the evidence with surgical precision: the recordings, the photos, the psychological evaluation, the testimony of neighbors who'd heard us fighting. My lawyer fought back, but we were playing defense against a perfectly orchestrated offense. Every argument we made seemed to prove their point. My love for the children became obsession. My desire to see them became harassment. My pain at losing them became evidence of my instability. The judge awarded Lisa temporary custody, with my visits reduced to once a month, to see the children I'd raised for 10 years, the children who'd been my whole world. "Mr. Patterson," Judge Hawthorne said, her voice cold and final, "you need to understand that these children have been traumatized by your behavior. They need time to heal, to feel safe. Perhaps with counseling and anger management, we can eventually increase your visitation." Counseling, anger management, as if I were the problem, as if I were the one who'd been lying and manipulating and destroying a family. I attended every required session, jumped through every hoop they put in front of me. I took parenting classes, underwent psychological evaluation after psychological evaluation, submitted to drug tests and home inspections. I did everything the system asked of me, hoping to prove I was a good father. But the system wasn't designed to find the truth. It was designed to process cases efficiently, to make quick decisions based on initial impressions, and Lisa had made sure that first impression painted me as the villain. Meanwhile, she was systematically erasing me from the children's lives. She moved them to a new school district, changed their phone numbers, blocked me on social media. She was creating a new narrative where I didn't exist, where they'd never had a father named David who loved them. The worst part was watching my children adapt to this new reality. During our monthly visits, they seemed more distant, more guarded. They'd been told stories about me, fed a version of events where I was the bad guy. Slowly, inevitably, they were starting to believe it. When the system designed to protect children becomes a weapon against loving parents, who's really keeping kids safe? How far would you go to fight for your children if everyone believed you were the monster? 8 months after Lisa destroyed my life, I found my smoking gun. It came from an unexpected source, Dr. Sarah Chen, the psychologist who'd helped build the case against me. She called my lawyer on a Tuesday morning, her voice shaking with what sounded like guilt. "I need to speak with you about the Patterson case," she said. "There are things I discovered that weren't included in my original report." Dr. Chen had been reviewing her files when she found discrepancies in Lisa's story, dates that didn't match, incidents that couldn't be corroborated, behavioral patterns that suggested coaching rather than genuine trauma. She'd also discovered that Lisa had been seeing her for months before filing for divorce, not for therapy, but to build a case. She was very specific about what she wanted me to document, Dr. Chen admitted during our meeting. She guided the conversation, fed me information, even brought the children in for sessions where she stayed in the room. I should have recognized the manipulation, but her presentation was so convincing. The children's statements, Dr. Chen realized, had been rehearsed. Their fear of me wasn't based on actual experiences, but on stories they'd been told repeatedly. Lisa had been coaching them, preparing them to testify against me, using their love for her as a weapon against their love for me. But the most damning evidence was what Dr. Chen had discovered about Lisa's past. She'd done this before. In college, she'd accused a boyfriend of stalking when he tried to break up with her. She'd filed false police reports, created fake evidence, destroyed his reputation. The charges were eventually dropped, but the pattern was clear. She's a master manipulator, Dr. Chen said. She studies people, finds their weaknesses, then exploits them. She's been playing a long game with you, Mr. Patterson. This wasn't a divorce. It was a heist. We filed an emergency motion to reopen the case. Armed with Dr. Chen's new testimony and the evidence of Lisa's past behavior. But the legal system moves slowly, and Lisa had been using that time to cement her control over the children. She'd enrolled them in therapy with a new psychologist, one who specialized in parental alienation recovery. The children were being treated for the trauma of having an abusive father, reinforcing the narrative that I was dangerous, that they were safer without me. When I finally got back to court, the children had been living with this lie for almost a year. Sarah was 11 now, Jake was 9, and they barely looked at me during the hearing. They'd been transformed from my loving children into prosecution witnesses against their own father. The judge listened to Dr. Chen's testimony with skepticism. "This is all very interesting," she said, "but it doesn't change the fact that these children are thriving in their current environment. They've been stable for months. Why would we disrupt that now?" Because it was built on lies. Because my children had been stolen from me. Because the truth still mattered, even when it was inconvenient. But the system didn't care about the truth. It cared about stability, about avoiding lawsuits, about protecting itself from criticism. And I was a threat to that stability. 14 months after losing my children, I was a different man. The divorce had been finalized, the custody arrangement made permanent. I was allowed to see Sarah and Jake for 4 hours every other Sunday, supervised visits that felt more like prison visits than family time. I'd lost my house, most of my savings, and my faith in justice, but I hadn't lost my determination. I'd been building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for one final battle, because I'd discovered something that changed everything. Lisa wasn't just a manipulator, she was a predator. The investigation I'd commissioned had uncovered a pattern of behavior going back 20 years. Lisa had targeted vulnerable men, wealthy men, men with something to lose. She'd destroy their lives, take their assets, and disappear with their children. She'd done it at least 3 times before me. Her first victim was a doctor in California. She'd seduced him, convinced him to marry her, then accused him of abuse when he discovered her affairs. She'd taken half his assets and moved to Texas, where she'd found her next target, a successful businessman who'd ended up losing custody of his daughter and spending years in legal battles. I wasn't her first victim. I was just the latest in a long line of men she'd destroyed. And Sarah and Jake weren't her children. They were her weapons, her tools, her insurance policy against anyone who might threaten her control. The FBI was finally interested. Financial fraud, identity theft, organized conspiracy. Lisa had left a trail of crimes across multiple states, but the investigation would take years, and my children would be adults by the time justice was served. I couldn't wait that long. I couldn't let her destroy 2 more innocent lives the way she'd destroyed mine. So I did something that would either save my children or destroy what little remained of my life. I broke the law. I hired a team of private investigators to surveil Lisa 24/7. I had her followed, her phone monitored, her communications tracked. I was building a case that would expose her completely, but I was also violating the restraining order, risking arrest, gambling everything on one final roll of the dice. The evidence we gathered was explosive. Lisa was already grooming her next victim, a wealthy widower named Robert Chen. She was using the same playbook, the same tactics, the same lies. She was planning to destroy him just like she'd destroyed me. But she'd made a mistake. In her communications with Robert, she'd admitted to fabricating evidence against me. She'd confessed to coaching the children, to manipulating the court system, to stealing my family as part of a larger pattern of fraud. I had her. Finally, after 18 months of hell, I had the evidence that would expose her completely. But presenting it would mean admitting to illegal surveillance, violating court orders, and risking criminal charges myself. I didn't care. My children were worth any risk, any sacrifice, any consequence. I was going to bring Lisa down, even if it destroyed me in the process. The courtroom was packed when I presented the evidence. Lisa's lawyer objected to everything, claiming illegal surveillance and violation of due process. But the recordings spoke for themselves. Lisa's voice, clear and cold, admitting to fabricating evidence, coaching the children, destroying innocent men for sport. David was so easy to manipulate, she said in one recording. He actually believed I loved him. Can you imagine? 20 years of marriage, and he never suspected a thing. Men are so stupid when they think with their hearts. Judge Hawthorne listened to the recordings with the expression of growing horror. This wasn't just a custody dispute, it was a criminal conspiracy that had been playing out in her courtroom for 2 years. But the most devastating evidence was what Lisa had said about the children. She'd never wanted them. They were just tools, props in her elaborate schemes. She'd been using them to manipulate me, to control me, to destroy me. And when she was done with me, she'd planned to abandon them, just like she'd abandoned the others. The kids are getting older, she said in another recording. They're starting to ask questions about their father. It's becoming harder to control them. I might need to make other arrangements. Other arrangements. She was planning to abandon Sarah and Jake, to dump them in foster care or with relatives, to disappear with her new victim, and start the cycle again. The judge ordered an immediate custody evaluation, suspended all visitation, and launched a criminal investigation. Lisa was arrested that afternoon on charges of fraud, perjury, and child endangerment. The children were placed in emergency custody with my parents while the court sorted out the mess, but the damage was done. Sarah and Jake had been living with lies for almost 2 years. They'd been told I was dangerous, that I'd hurt their mother, that they were safer without me. They'd been brainwashed, manipulated, turned against their own father by someone who'd never truly loved them. The first time I saw them after Lisa's arrest, they were scared, confused, angry. They didn't understand why their mother was in jail, why they couldn't go home, why everyone was treating her like a criminal. In their minds, I was still the villain, the one who destroyed their family. "Why did you do this to us?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you take Mommy away?" I wanted to tell her the truth, to explain everything, to make her understand that I'd been fighting for them all along. But she was 12 years old, traumatized, and confused, and the truth was too complicated, too painful for a child to process. Instead, I held her while she cried, and I promised her that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Rebuilding a relationship with your children after they've been programmed to hate you is like trying to repair a broken vase while someone keeps throwing rocks at it. Every conversation was a minefield. Every interaction shadowed by the lies they'd been told. Family therapy became our sanctuary. Dr. Martinez specialized in parental alienation cases, and she guided us through the painful process of separating truth from fiction, love from manipulation, healing from harm. But progress was slow, measured in tiny victories and devastating setbacks. Sarah was the hardest to reach. At 13, she'd been old enough to understand the adult conversations, to internalize the accusations, to build her own defenses against the confusion. She'd appointed herself Jake's protector, which meant protecting him from me. Every time I tried to connect with her, she shut down, retreated. reminded me of all the reasons she'd been taught to fear me. Jake was younger, more resilient, but also more confused. He remembered the father who'd read him bedtime stories, who'd taught him to ride a bike, who'd made him laugh until his sides hurt. But he also remembered the mother who'd told him that man was dangerous, that those memories were lies, that safety meant staying away from Daddy. The breakthrough came 6 months after Lisa's arrest. Sarah was going through her mother's belongings, trying to understand what had happened, when she found a journal. Lisa had been documenting her plans, her manipulations, her strategies for destroying me. She'd written about coaching the children, about fabricating evidence, about using their love as a weapon. Sarah read it all. Every cruel detail, every calculated lie, every moment of manipulation. She saw herself and Jake described not as beloved children, but as tools, as assets, as problems to be managed. She read about Lisa's plans to abandon them, to disappear with her new victim, to start over somewhere else. That night, Sarah called me for the first time in 2 years. She was crying, sobbing, barely able to speak. "Daddy," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I believed her. I'm so sorry I hated you." I cried too. We both cried for all the time we'd lost, for all the pain we'd endured, for all the lies that had poisoned our relationship. But we also cried with relief, because finally, we could start over. Jake's healing was different but equally profound. He'd been carrying guilt for loving me despite being told I was dangerous, for missing me despite being told I was harmful. When the truth came out, he felt liberated, free to love his father without shame or fear. The legal system finally acknowledged what had been done to us. Lisa was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and child endangerment. The judge who'd presided over our case was censured for failing to recognize the signs of parental alienation. The psychologist who'd helped build the case against me lost her license. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the quiet moments, Sarah laughing at my jokes again, Jake falling asleep in my arms during movie night, both of them calling me Daddy without hesitation or fear. We'd survived the worst thing that could happen to a family. We'd been broken, scattered, nearly destroyed. But we'd found our way back to each other, and that was worth everything. 3 years after that phone call destroyed my world, I'm sitting in my new house, watching my children do homework at the kitchen table. Sarah is 16 now, brilliant and strong, with a fierce protective instinct that she's learned to direct toward justice instead of fear. Jake is 14, still my comedian, still capable of making me laugh until my sides hurt. They're different than they were before. We all are. You can't survive something like this without being changed by it. But we're stronger now, more grateful for each other, more aware of how precious these ordinary moments really are. Lisa will be released from prison in 2 years. She's already filed appeals, already claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy, already trying to manipulate the system that finally saw through her lies. She'll probably try to contact the children, to rebuild the narrative that painted her as the victim and me as the monster. But Sarah and Jake know the truth now. They've seen the evidence, read the journals, understood the manipulation. They know that the woman who gave birth to them was never really their mother. She was their captor, their abuser, their destroyer. And they know that the man who raised them, who fought for them, who never gave up on them, is their real father in every way that matters. I've learned things I never wanted to know about the family court system, about parental alienation, about how easily good people can be destroyed by those who know how to work the system. I've learned that the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just gives you better weapons to fight with. But I've also learned about resilience, about the power of love to survive even the most systematic attempts to destroy it. I've learned that children are stronger than we think, that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds, that families can be rebuilt even from the most scattered pieces. The father who lost his children in that phone call 3 years ago is gone. In his place is a man who's been tested by fire, who's fought through hell, who's emerged with his most precious treasures intact. I'm not the same man I was before, but I'm a better father, a stronger person, a more grateful human being. To any parent who's fighting this battle right now, who's been accused of crimes they didn't commit, who's watching their children slip away because of lies and manipulation, don't give up. The system is broken, but it's not irreparable. The truth may be buried, but it's not destroyed. Your children may be lost, but they're not gone forever. Fight. Fight with everything you have. Fight with evidence, with persistence, with love. Fight even when everyone tells you to give up, even when the system seems rigged against you, even when your own children seem to hate you, because love is stronger than lies. Truth is more powerful than manipulation, and families can survive anything if they refuse to surrender to those who would destroy them. My children are home now. We're together, we're healing, we're building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. It's not the same as it was before, it's better. Because we know how much it's worth, because we know how close we came to losing it forever. This is my story, this is my truth. This is my promise to every parent who's fighting this battle. It's not over until you say it's over. And I'm never giving up on my children again. If this story has touched your heart, if you've fought your own battles for your children, if you believe that love can overcome even the most systematic attempts to destroy it, please hit that like button. Share your own story in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel because I'll be sharing more about this journey, about the legal battles, about the resources that helped us heal. Your support isn't just engagement. It's hope for every parent who's fighting to come home to their children. Together we can change the system. Together we can protect our families. Together we can make sure that no child is ever used as a weapon against the parent who loves them most. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that families are worth fighting for.